Welcome to Finding Faith, the space we come to share stories of encounter, ask questions, and share in the lived experience of others. As you listen to the stories of our interview guests, I ask that you consider the courage it takes to stand before your peers and share your experience of faith for the benefit of another. My name is Jessie Bennett, and this is the 22nd episode of Finding Faith. Today, we have with us Kadie Riney. Kadie, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Kadie Riney. I am married to John Riney. I'm a mother of three, Eve, Augustus, and Theodore. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm from Greenville, Indiana. It's like 20 minutes north of Louisville. And so I moved here to go to school, and then I ultimately met John and kind of came out here. So
Kadie and John lost their house in a fire last year, and she's going to talk a little bit about how she encountered God in the community out here at Whitesville and just being surrounded by them in that time of tragedy for them. So Kadie, why don't you tell us your story?
Yeah, basically, I grew up Catholic. I went to a public school, but I had to go to like Sunday school classes on Sunday to get my first communion. I have not been confirmed, actually. It was a pretty normal, everything was as is. Faith and religion wasn't necessarily the top priority in my house, I guess, growing up. Not that it wasn't important, but it wasn't always shown that it was important. And then ultimately, I played softball, and I was really, really good at softball. And I got to have a choice into what I wanted to do, if I wanted to continue going to these classes on the weekend or, play softball. And I played for a bunch of travel teams, one being in Evansville, actually, when I was 16. And so I chose softball and kind of stepped away from the church. Like I said, I was very good and I worked really hard at it, which probably kept me out of trouble. I received a couple scholarships asking if I wanted to go play in college. And I took the one in Owensboro, and I played softball at Kentucky Wesleyan, which brought me to Owensboro. So I played softball there for a couple years, never went to church or anything. I graduated and ultimately met John. I think we both had kind of fallen away from the church, and it wasn't something that we were both in, but we knew we wanted to be a part of. And we knew that it was important in our future and in our family. We knew we wanted to get married in the church. We knew we wanted to bring up kids, our potential children in the church. And we wanted to, take a step back in. And what does that look like, And so we had to meet with Father to get married at St. Mary's. And, since then, I feel like we've become members of the church, and we've tried to make it to where necessarily my parents didn't find, not that they didn't find religion important, but it wasn't ever part of our everyday life, whereas we are trying to incorporate it and do fun things and do activities. And it's a known culture that we go to church on Sundays, whereas maybe that wasn't necessarily told to me growing up, if you missed, you missed. But we try to make it if people come and stay with us and visit us on the weekends, everyone is aware that we're going to church on Sunday. It's part of our culture that we want it in our family. So yeah, we got back in the church. We got married, and we wanted to raise our family in it, make it a priority. And we just kind of had to relearn, especially me, I had to relearn all the stuff in my brain that just kind of got pushed out, that you forget, or that you learned at one time when you're 11 and haven't looked at in 15 years. So also, I think during this season of my life of raising kids and, sometimes going to church is really hard. It's not necessarily the thing, that's at the top of my list that I want to do. I'm more of one that wants to wake up and drink coffee and wake up for a second, before I have to rush and get everyone together. And, no, not one Sunday morning looks like that. It's, I wake up, I get myself ready, I get all these kids ready. Half the time I'm pregnant, and, John works nights. So he's just getting home, and, it's crazy. most of the time on Sundays, like I'm struggling to figure out what this homily is about because I'm trying to get these little kids to pay attention, or, and you're frustrated or you're, hot or whatever. So much of my life, I feel like I'm just going through the motions. Like one day it'll be better. And then during all of this, there's all these little like God winks or like things that happen to me help me realize that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or that I'm where I'm supposed to be. It can come in many forms. Could be that the band sung my favorite song during church that day. It could be that while my kids are being wild and I'm frustrated and I'm leaving church, someone stops to tell me to keep up the good work. It could be an older mom who will stop to tell me how cute my kids are and they just love seeing us on church on Sundays. Or it could be sometimes like in my face, and it could be, Father Brian should have just like been like, hey girl, this is for you. This homily's for you, where it's just my life to a T. And so I feel like all of these are a reminder, as I'm like struggling through this season of my life, that, hey, this is where you're supposed to be. And this is this relationship. And then while all of this of me of like going through the motions, like not knowing that I don't think anybody really notices that I'm here or who we are, the unthinkable happens and my house burns down. My family did help out. John's family, my in-laws are really the best people. They helped out a lot. That's who we stayed with the first week. But, this parish saved my livelihood. In all forms. And so just while I was going through the motions, all these other people, kind of came and really helped out. This town is really insane when it comes to stuff like that. Just the day that my house caught fire, it was just me and the kids there. John was at work. I got on my treadmill to run and it wasn't working right. And so I was frustrated because, there's always something wrong at the house, And so I was like, add this to the list of things. My treadmill stopped working. And I went to the kitchen to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And I looked up and there was just like this black smoke on the white door. And I remember thinking like, what in the heck is that? And so I opened the door to the office where the treadmill was, and it was just black smoke. I didn't see fire or anything, but I didn't really know. Honest to God, I didn't really know what was going on. I just reached down and grabbed Teddy, and I told Eve and Gus, they were coming down the hallway. I was like, hey, let's go to the car. And so I took everybody to the car, and when I got to the car, I could see the window. I could see the fire in the office. Then I realized my house was on fire, and I didn't have my keys to my car or anything, so I ran back up, and I got the keys to my car. I backed up. And this is like, I'm like calling 911, you're frantic. And my husband, and mother-in-law's husband was down the road hunting or something. So he stopped. He saw that my car was parked and he came up there. So he was the first person to the scene, right before the fire trucks. But, the next person was Brad Odd. He's my neighbor on Jake Russell. And he came and grabbed my kids and was like, I'm going to take your kids. And he got there so fast. I joke with Lindsay. I'm like, he got there so fast that I like wouldn't let him take my kids. I was like, no, I'm not done counting yet. You can't have my kids yet. And then he was like, okay. And so he hung around, and he ultimately was like, I'm going to take them. And so you all can like focus on this. John's not here yet. I like started crying. I was like, they don't have any clothes. And he's like, we got clothes. And I said, I don't have any diapers. And he said, I have diapers. And ultimately, the odds are the best place for these 3 kids to go. They have anything you could imagine down there, I'm sure. So he took my kids, and then, David Nash and James Jarbo were the next two to the scene, and, then my husband. And so my family, of course, isn't from here, and they called and were asking to come, but I told them no, because it would like gave me anxiety to think like that my mom and dad were going to come here and I have nowhere for them to stay. So like, no, please, that will just like add to all this that's going on right now. So my family wasn't here, but all of these people came to help during this. James Jarbo got me a car seat like before I left my house that day, he had a car seat that he brought to me because Teddy's was inside. I don't know where it came from. Like, who did he get that? I have no idea, so it's still the one Teddy uses to this day. We were there for several hours. Father Brian showed up. I mean, of all the people to be at your house when it's burned down, Father Brian, it was a terrible day, but it could have been a much worse day. It could have easily been a much worse day. And, when I left my house, that was around 9:30 in the morning. I finally left my house around 4. Took them a while to get all the flames out. And then you sit there for a little bit. I went down to get my kids from my neighbor's house, and Brad and Lindsay had already had all kinds of donations to fill my car with. Shasta Nash, she brought stuff. She brought a bunch of donations before I ever left my house. Jenny Pedley. I mean, just the people that I don't necessarily talk to all the time. These aren't my best friends, but they came in a time of dire need and helped me out. Then once we left the house, I lived with my in-laws for a week, and then we got the rental. And then once we were on that rental, I mean, it was insane, the donations, because you can just see when we're home. Like, you drive past the house on Vessels, like everyone can just drive past and know we're there. And so the amount of people, it got to the first couple weeks was insane. People dropping by. I mean, food, money, toys, clothes. I mean, it was overwhelming to the point where Brad and Lindsay had their house at donations. My mother-in-law had donations at her house. My sister-in-law had donations at her house. And my friend Caitlin had donations. She was also like a donation spot. So I had these 4 houses. And everyone wants to bring me this stuff. And I'm like, I literally don't have a home. I don't have nowhere to put this stuff. You cannot bring me all this stuff yet. Like, I can't take it. I can't bombard my mother-in-law with 4 houses of donations, And so once we got to the rental, it was like we would get a huge drop off. And then my sister came from home twice with 2 carloads of donations from people that I have not seen since I moved to Owensboro in 2007. I mean, it's the craziest thing I've ever been through. The church took the second round of donations for us one Sunday. I mean, just all the help, all the clothes. I mean, I think my kids still have clothes from the donations that were given to us that I was able to keep and for the next season. And here we are, a year later. Even your sister, who I didn't even know who she knew who I was. She's like, hey, I'm doing a little bake sale for you. Like, oh my God. So she brings stuff to me, toys, books, just all kinds of things. It was really insane. It was, like I said, a terrible day, but, the help is something that you would never expect or imagine and especially, it's so humbling because we actually really needed the help. And so when you're these people that try to do everything on your own, or you try to do what you think you need to do, but you're in this tough spot where it's like, I actually do need all this help. It's a very humbling experience. Because of that, I don't feel I've ever been closer to God or this parish. And probably because of that, I feel I'm more helpful when something happens, because I'm like, well, maybe all of these people helped me because they've also been through something that I don't know about. So when it came to be my turn that I needed help, so now whenever I hear about anyone, I'm like, well, here, we got to go help them because all of these people helped me and they don't even know who I am. I'm going to try to the best of my ability to spread the word of God because of this, because, like I said, it could have been a much worse day. And then he put all of these people in my path to help me. And I'll be talking about and helping St. Mary's until the day that I die, because when literally all was lost, so much was restored. And so for that, I can't be more thankful.
Thank you so much, Kadie, for sharing your story with us and for walking us through that incredibly, what I imagine was a very terrifying and horrific day. It shows a lot of vulnerability on your part to be able to talk about it. And you did so with such grace. I don't know that I could have done that without a breakdown.
Well, luckily it's been talked about. It is a year later. It was just the anniversary last week. So I was very anxious that day once that day came around, but it is my truth. And it is, I am very thankful for everything. So the breakdown could have been here. I was just holding it back.
One of the first things I want to talk to you about, you mentioned that you had kind of fallen away from the church. Not that there was anything in particular that happened, just kind of, drifted away and eventually came back. So what was that like for you coming back into a church as an adult after having been gone for so many years?
It's kind of overwhelming. And, you kind of feel like that everyone notices that you've never been here before. They're like, they've never been here. That's weird, but it was overwhelming. And because especially, when you haven't gone to church in so long and then you're doing it to get married and you have to go through the classes and everything. But we also really enjoyed that. Like when we had to meet with Father Brian and have our counseling sessions, we loved that. We looked forward to it. I would do it all the time. I love it, and so, it was overwhelming, but it was good to come back and meet all the friendly faces. And then I always think now, if me and John were to get married now, all the people that would come that weren't invited then because of how much our church family grew. We didn't have this huge church basis at the time. So it was just this is who's invited. Whereas if we were to get married right now, there'd be 100 more people that we'd have to invite. Cause
standing room only.
Yeah. It's we can't get married during COVID because, we have to have all these people here. Yeah. So it was intimidating, but this church is so welcoming, and they're they want you here and they want you to be a part of it. And it really is just one of the best parishes I've been to, just the whole thing. We visit when we travel and we are out of town and we go to mass, we go to different churches. And St. Mary's really is above many. The choir, the band, Father Brian is far superior. The people, it's most churches, we are not a dying church by any means of the imagination. And so, we're so very lucky to get to be a part of I'm lucky to get to be a part of this parish. I'm honored to say I am a part of it. So,
and that's so wonderful to hear. Cause I've talked to others who've come back into the church and they say exactly the same thing you did. That's very intimidating. It's very overwhelming. They're worried that people are going to notice all of a sudden there's this new person and the judgment that may come with that. So I also want to, applaud you or commend you for taking that leap of faith and that step of coming back into the church. Cause I can't imagine that's easy.
But also, that's how, I can't tell you if anyone their first time was on Sunday. And so some of it's so internal too. You think all of these things when really everyone's just oh, I've probably just, because if someone goes to 7:00 mass, I've never seen that person. So.
Right.
It's just, I could think they're new showing up at 9 a.m. and they've been every Sunday at 7. I would have no idea. So
they've been here longer than me. Right. Yeah. It's very true. That is correct. It's probably more internal than anything. You also talk about having kids, this phase of life being very hectic. We have 2 young children. How old are your kids right now?
Eve is 4, Gus is 3, and Teddy is 2.
Okay, so they're very young. We have a 5 and a 3-year-old, and it's funny you mentioned this hecticness and not being able to pay attention, because my husband and myself were just talking about that the other day, that we feel like we're just going through the motions, that we're not able to pay attention. We spend half of our time chasing toddlers or walking back and forth from the bathroom or walking back and forth from the cry room because we're correcting bad behaviors and attitude adjustments.
Same.
But
it's usually Teddy. You've probably seen Teddy.
What mass do y'all go to?
9. John usually walks out with Teddy. So if you've seen it.
We haven't noticed. We're too busy with our 3 and 5, right? Maybe that's more internal too. You feel like everybody's watching that.
Absolutely, yeah.
But, I heard someone say once that in this stage of life, our most important job isn't to show up and maybe necessarily be able to participate the same way like a single person would or someone who's older. Our most important job is to help raise these little souls. And that might mean that I miss the homily or the reading or practically the entire thing because I'm wrestling a little octopus the entire time.
Oh, yeah.
But it's such important work as parents to be able to bring up our children, to be able to teach them the faith, to pass that on to them, to help them understand what's going on. And I can't tell you how many questions we answer during Mass. Sometimes the same ones week after week after week, but that's how they learn. That's how they soak up that stuff.
Well, and then too, it just becomes part of what we do. And at some point it does get easier. Eve was terrible. She was terrible. to the point where I swear Father Brian has stopped us after Mass because she's been so terrible. And he's been like, just keep coming back. I swear it gets easier. And I was pregnant with Teddy at the time. And I said, does it? Cause I just keep having babies. Like, I was like, is that what happens? But Eve she is the best because this is what she's been doing for 4 years of her life now. Mm-hmm. And now it's just Teddy's turn to go through this, and even though it is rough, like anytime on Sundays, like we're starting to get ready and Gus will say, are we going to see Father? And I'll say, yeah, we're going to see Father. And that's all just because of us going through the motions. And like, this is just what we do, Yep. So got to keep trucking.
It does get better.
Yeah.
It does get better. We have fewer fights.
Yeah.
Some weeks more than others, but it does get better. And that's the important thing is that it only gets better if you keep taking them.
Oh, correct. Yeah.
I know it would be so easy to find a babysitter for the kids so that I could pay attention at Mass, but I know we're finally hitting a point where I can actually listen during the homily, mm-hmm. but they begin to learn because they see other people around them. And if I knew that it might be easier to get someone to watch them, or me and my husband go to different masses so that we could each just sit and be able to listen, but then our kids would never be able to soak it in. It's like school. Right. It's hard, or daycare, or, the first time you're dropping them off somewhere. Yeah. It's rough in the beginning, but it gets better. Yeah.
Well, and I always try to tell myself, especially when John's at work and I have to go to Mass by myself, that Jesus' sacrifice is greater than my 60 minutes I have to sit here and wrestle Teddy. And so it doesn't always work, but I do. And that's just kind of what I'm like, it's 60 minutes. You do a lot of things for 60 minutes. Sometimes I just have to like kind of break it down to myself and be like, this is what we're going to do. And then you always feel better when you leave.
Yes. And that's the key. It's always better to go. I love that you talk about these little God winks of God, like affirming that mm-hmm. this is where you're supposed to be. This is what you're supposed to be doing. And that he wants you there. Mm-hmm. You're important. Yeah. You're an important part of what's going on. You also had mentioned at one point talking about incorporating faith into your household. What are some of the ways in which you have incorporated faith into your household for your kids?
Oh, this is a fun one. We have been the best at this year, I will say. And so I found this book. This might not be the absolute correct. The author is this woman named Kadie Riney, I believe. She's a mother of 9. She's Catholic, and it's something called like living liturgically throughout the year. It's basically like all the months. She, like I said, she has 9 kids, and it's basically like what they do in their traditions. And they celebrate, which I think this is like a fun idea. They celebrate birthdays and baptisms in their house. And so even like when the baptism comes around and as the kids get older, they get to like choose what they eat and the dessert that day. And then they have to pick a saint and like learn about this saint throughout the year. Along with that, she has like monthly booklets. And so I bought the book that was Catholic all December. And it's just like every day of the month, especially December. December's a good one because, and so there's all these novenas and feast days, and there's all these different prayers.
There's a ton of feast days in December.
And there's like the 90-day novena. And that also helps me learn. Like I had genuinely no idea that the feast day of Adam and Eve was the Christmas Eve until this year.
Really?
Yeah. I had no idea. I don't know why. I'm slightly embarrassed to say it, but I had no idea. So I'm like, so I read this, every day there's a prayer, there's a story about a saint on their feast day. And so instead of saying like, we try to say 1 decade of the rosary, because, we got littles at night before bed, we would say these other prayers. And then it was actually really fun because like the 9-day novena, there's actually singing in it. So it was like, there's like a story, and then I actually felt more prepared for church because the readings on Sunday might be ones that we had read throughout the week. So even though like I might not hear everything, I would hear some be like, oh, I know what this is about because I already read that this week. And then she also lists all these fun activities. So like the feast day of St. Nicholas, we made candy cane cookies. We read the traditional story of St. Nicholas. And then even in it, she has a bunch of like where she answers questions that you might come up with. Like if your kid's like, well, why does he come here on December the 6th and not, so it's just been a really fun book. It's been a fun read. And so I would read hers and incorporate it in. We made our own Advent wreath this year. So we made sure we like lit that and said all the prayers. And, that's something else that they became part of. Just been trying to do more activities and really get our praying because, at the end of the day, that's what they're going to remember, not how hard church was, but that we made cookies and we said prayers at night, and, and those aren't necessarily memories that I have, but they're memories I would like my kids to have. So that's what we've been trying to do.
And, that's really where the battleground for these kids' faith lives is won. I mean, church is 1 hour on Sunday. It's in the home. Parents are the first catechists. So we're called to be the teachers of that. And so modeling that, actually, that sounds like a really cool book. I might have to look it up.
It's really cool. I love it. It's a really fun read. I believe it's like written for moms, because she's like, do whatever you can do. And, it's more like she tries to get all her Christmas shopping done before Advent starts, because like she wants all of December to not be about like buying gifts, but like they even do like a nativity play, but she has 9 kids and they're older. Okay. But they do like their own nativity play, or they like do, like little festivals, or they all play instruments and they like sing, and like, it's glorious. But so I read it and I get excited, and then I'm like, well, this is what we're going to do today. So it kind of like opened up, gives you some new ideas to do with everyone. So we even got the January one. It's not as full with, stuff, but it's still, something different than a decade to say at night. The little story about a saint and then the saints are really interesting
and very engaging for kids. Yeah. Kids are naturally drawn to stories. Yeah. And so when you start talking about like St. Nicholas and Adam and Eve,
St. Lucy,
they have questions.
St. Lucy, she was a good one in December. That was a good one.
Yeah.
She's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So it's been a good time. I feel like we did the best this past month. We've been trying to be better. We really started during Corona when we were all home, because you get in the excuses of being like, well, John's at work and it's bedtime. Like, we're done here. We are home and we were all here, and this is what we're going to do. And so probably since March we've been trying, and then December was probably our best month and our most fun month, because, all their stuff, because all the stuff's going on,
That's what all the things are.
Yeah.
Yeah. For all of the madness that was last year and all of the crazy that it brought to our lives, there have been some great blessings coming out of it, in that the time together as family and being able to slow down and start some of these traditions. We've noticed even in our own family that we were together more and able to do a lot more with our kids throughout this past year, just because there's nothing else on our calendar.
Right. And you can't go anywhere.
Right.
And they're actually getting to a point where, 4 is still young, but it's, before 4, it's probably a little too young to be like making cookies with. But you're actually 4. So we can like color these nativity sheets, or there's a sticker where you can like put them. And, I gave Eve this sticker sheet. It was a nativity scene. And I would just hand her the people that go in this scene. And I didn't tell her anything. And she put them perfectly. And I was so proud. And I was like, this is like a little wink to me too, because even though I don't know that she's paying attention, like she is, like she just put all of these there where they go.
They soak up so much that we don't even realize, and just absorb the culture around them.
Yeah.
Which is why you have to steep them in it.
Yeah. And so, and they do get excited. I think the 60 minutes of church itself is hard on them, but I think all other aspects they do like, like I said, Gus is always excited to see Father. He's like, are we going to go see Father, Brian? We got to go to church. Or when I drop him off at school, he says, can we see Father? And I'll say, no, he's busy. So now when we show up, he goes, can't see Father. He's working.
That's adorable. So if it's okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about the house fire that happened last year.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if your kids are 4, 3, and 2, they would have been 3, 2, and 1 last year.
Correct.
Wow.
Teddy turned 1 January 16th, and my house burnt down January 8th. So he was just under 1.
Wow. So at home by yourself,
yes.
3 small kids.
Yes.
Wow. First of all, I'm having a hard time processing just that, like, anxiety.
Honestly, I think the best thing was that I didn't really know what was going on. I just knew something was off, because there was genuinely no panic. I just opened that door and was like, what the heck? And I just kind of grabbed Teddy, because he was by my feet, because he's 1 year old, they don't leave your side. And then even Gus just happened to be walking out of their bedroom, coming down the hallway. And I was like, hey, come here. We're just going to go to the car really quick. And so my thought was, I'm going to go put them in the car, because I didn't want Teddy to be like trying to like get to me if I'm like trying to put a fire out. So I was like, I'm going to go put them in the car so I know where they are. And then I'm going to come back and handle this situation. But I realized once we were outside, it was out of my control. Like there was no handling the situation. And so when I had to go back up and get my keys, and I mean, I didn't buckle them in. I just like put them in the car. When I went back to get my keys 1 minute later and I opened my door, like I already couldn't see in my house. And that's what's terrifying. I mean, like a matter of seconds. And if my kids wouldn't have been right there, I would have lost one. Or if I wouldn't have shut the door where like the treadmill was, you know, like I shut the door and I saw the black smoke. Like if I would have left that door open, it could have been good because maybe I would have seen something going on, but my house would have filled with smoke faster and all my kids weren't right there. And so it went down exactly how it needed to go down. And we were all out. And while it was all my stuff, and I was really sad about losing all my stuff, it was just stuff. It wasn't, you know, the important things.
What strikes me just is, you know, thinking about this is the absolute providence of God in that moment. You know, you said something or touched on something very important, is that like it was outside of your control. And I wonder how often in our own lives, like it is outside of our control. We still try to control it. I don't know. I guess just the surrendering of all of that this is so far out of your control. There's nothing you can do. And yet God still provided everything you needed was taken care of. Like you said, within
Immediately. Yeah.
So fast.
Yeah.
Community members started showing up to take the kids, to bring the necessities that you guys were going to need to find a place for you to stay.
Now, yeah. Like if my neighbor's house is on fire, what would I have done? I don't know. But they did the correct, but like, I don't know if that's where my brain would have been. If I would have been like, John, we have to go get those kids from Brad and Lindsay. You know, I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened, but I love that was their first thought. That didn't have to be their first thought. You know, it just was. And I don't even know how they knew my house is on fire, you know, like, so I don't know. Well, actually I do know. The very first person to show up to my house was a volunteer fire person. So he was like in his own car, but he had his gear, I guess, like in case someone was inside. And he said, I said, is there anyone coming? Like, you know, like I'm in panic mode. My house is on fire. He said, I think so, but I was down at Brad Odd's house when I got the call. So he was like at my neighbor's house. He was like, there's a fire on Jake Russell. And they're like, we're on Jake Russell, you know? So that's how I guess they knew, because he was there quickly. So
the whole thing just kind of blows me away. You talk about this immediate support system that began to show up. And I feel like I've heard this story over and over about Whitesville. That is one thing that this community does well, is it rallies really well behind people, especially when they need it, you know, in these dire moments. What was it like being on the receiving end of the community rallying behind you? I think you'd mentioned at one point you weren't even sure people knew that you existed or that it mattered that you were there. And then all of a sudden these people who you didn't know well were there.
The important thing, the church is this community. And so that's what Whitesville is, St. Mary's, you know, like, and so luckily I do go to this parish, and it was very overwhelming to receive all these things. I mean, cause it would be like nice things and a lot of, I mean, just so much thoughtfulness, you know, and it was very overwhelming, and it was very humbling. Cause like I said, it's hard to be someone who doesn't always like want to accept help. But in this time I have literally nothing, like my purse and everything was inside. Like I went back to get my keys. So like, I don't have my debit card. I don't have my license. I have genuinely nothing except the outfit that I had on, and my kids weren't even fully clothed. And John had his work outfit. So like at the end of the day, like I started the day with all of this stuff, and I ended the day with not a toothbrush. And so when you want to be like, I don't need any help, but in this moment, I need all the help I can receive. It's very humbling, and it's, I really couldn't have asked for anything more. I can't believe how much everybody helped out. So,
and how do you think that this experience of losing, of gaining, of the community rallying around you, how do you think that has impacted your relationship with God?
I think it couldn't have done it's grown it extremely. When you watch the news and you hear about how the world is bad, and it probably is, but in my corner of the world, it's not. I think when I think of humanity and I think of what's going on in my world, I still have a lot of hope and faith in humanity, because this is what's going on around here. I've never been closer to God or my parish, or even, you know, my husband. You know, we went through a terrible thing, and that too, where it could pull you apart. It brought us closer. I hate that my house burnt down, but in a lot of ways, I'm thankful for what came out of it.
Yeah, I like that last line that you said, that even when all was lost, all was restored.
Yeah, so much was restored.
So much was restored.
So, and I do mean that, but it was a terrible day. It was a terrible, terrible day.
That came with an incredible amount of blessings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Kadie, so much for joining us here today and sharing your story with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
And thank you all for listening here today. If you're interested in hearing more stories of finding faith and encountering, tune in next week for our next guest. If you have any questions, need someone to journey with, or would be interested in sharing your story, please contact me at findingfaith123@gmail.com.